Morning, Rabbi Side. To another another day set of Shiurim on Inyanei Krias as we prepare for the Kallah. So before we begin, I welcome, as always, our Natzig from Eretz HaKodesh, Rav Parkov, who was always kind enough to send me ha'aris on things that I say, correct possible misunderstandings, and always work to rectify to make things clear. So I sent Rav Pesach. I don't know if he's on a copy of the email Rabbi Parkov sent me. I'd like to read it to the island. The problem is, if it comes up as a screen share, we can all read it together. If not, I have to go back and forth. If you give me a second, I'm going to do so. Okay, so Parkov points out, in relation to what we said yesterday, which was a kasha of the Achronim, the Teres Chaim, and others, how was the Takana possibly, kind of Krias possibly be able to promulgate a Moshe Rabbeinu when there was no Torah, there was no Sefer Torah? This is a complicated subject because obviously it has ramifications on the historical flow of events in Midbar Sinai. We know certain things, other things are Leita Ba'arafael, Chazal and Midrashim, some of them brought by Rashi, some not, discuss this issue, but there is no 100% clarity on it. He did point out the following things I want to share with you. In Parshas Mishpatim, the pasuk says, "V'ikach sefer habris v'ikra b'aznei." What does the sefer habris? The Rabbi Mefarshim to try to explain what the sefer habris is. The machlekes and Mefarshim Mikra. Rashi says, startlingly so, and this is an example of a Mefarish Rashi. It's a Medrash Rabbi, I believe, that the sefer maybe it's a Mechilta. I don't remember. Sefer habris refers to Bebreshis Vadmatan Torah Umitzis Mistaba B'Mara. Hafla V'Fela. So Rashi seems to be telling you that there was already some sort of a Sefer Torah, and they had this. When was it written down? Not clear, but it existed. Maybe it already existed, parts of it, the Sipurim with the Avos, maybe it existed in Mitzrayim. Maybe it was written in the Midbar, since it stopped at Mount Torah. Makes sense. It was written in the Midbar. It included the mitzvahs and Stava B'Mara, several very important mitzvahs in the Stava B'Mara, including Shabbos. So some sort of Torah existed, whether or not it was the exact Sefer Torah that we have. The second Ari has his. Hold on a second. See if there we go. The second Ari that he has is, okay. I'm sorry, I'm scrunching close to the screen because I need to read it. So there was a machlekes. There is a machlekes in Gemara Samach how the Torah was written, Megillah, or Chasuma. Megillah indicates that as Kodesh Baruch Hu told Moshe, the parsha was written down. Now, whether these were collated together into the aforementioned Sefer Bris or not, I didn't have time. I apologize. I didn't have time to do a lot of research on the aforementioned Sefer Habris, which would require me to take out that chumash, which has all the Rishonim in it, to see how they deal with this question. I just remember from Chazring the Parsha that the issue is discussed by the other Rishonim. But in any case, Rabbi Parkov then goes on to say, according to the Mandam of the Torah Chasuma Nitna, is a Rosh Torah. Not that many people are aware that there is such a Pirush Torah, but there is. And he says, Yikach Sefer Habris, you got to pick it up here. It's cut off, so I can't read it. Beautiful. Zelmi Bracious ad Kavnir, the film on the Paragon is up in Turkasumanit. No? So the Rosh has this kasha, it was given to be written, codified, stamped, chasum, only at Arvais Mayav. Says the Rosh, the translate, Nichtav at Arvais Mayav, Balpek, Kibble Mesh Rabbeinu, Kol Mem Shalom, and Mishpatim Be'elach. So according to the Rosh going with Shitas, this Chazal brought in the Rashi until Mishpatim or till Matan Torah was written. I'm not sure why it says Mishpatim Be'elach. I guess because Matan Torah is in the middle of Yisrael. There's only one or two things there after Matan Torah, which is like Sal V'Mal Sol Mizbechi and the Isser of Hanafas Cherev Mateches on the Mizbeach. But obviously the Ikar of the mitzvahs after Matan Torah starts in Parshas Mishpatim. Okay, beautiful. Two wonderful inquiries. And now Reb Parker comes to a conclusion which Shailam can debate, and that is when Moshe Rabbeinu was metakein, according to the Rambam and according to the Rishalmi, that the kind of Krias Torah, they laid this Sefer Torah from the beginning till Mishpatim. No, I have no reason, in Brisk, there's a bitui called nunu. What does nunu mean? Nunu means I don't have a way to slug up what you're saying, but I'm not sure that it's sufficient a raya to say so. So I have no way to slug up this svara. It would require doing a lot more research, which at the moment I didn't have time to do. I apologize, but it's a beautiful svara to think about, and maybe this is an answer to the Teres Chaim's kasha. Okay, everybody say.
There's a raya perhaps to this. In the Kli Chemda says in Devarim that the Jews wore tefillin in the midbar. And he said there are only two parshas in the tefillin because that's all that they had. So if we say that the tefillin has to contain all the parshas of tefillin, it had all of them. So from that respect, it was complete. So to the extent we got whatever Torah we had through those parshas, we had it so a complete Torah as of then.
Beautiful. So what Rabbi Shlomo Yosef is alluding to is the Rajba's kasha and Menachos. The Rajba asked the kasha and the sugya of tefillin. How could they have put on tefillin in the midbar? They only got the last two parshiyos at the Arvas Mayav, and so they only had 2 out of the 4 parshiyos. And the Rishonim deal with this. And one of the terutzim, Matan Bei Midrasha, we base brisk, and I saw, I think if I remember correctly, in the Ari Gedal Yo, because I've learned this with my Elam before, maybe we learned it together in one form or the other, that the Abdinezah says the same teretz, and this is an example. I've used this as an example before of the startling, let's get the right word, the startling similarity between the Shita, the Svaras of Beis Brisk, started by the Beis Halevi and Reb Chaim, and the Gedali Pilot, the chief of which was the Abnei. They both say the same basic word. And that's what Shlomo Yosef was alluding to, that the site of the mitzvah tefillin was whatever the kiyum was. So in the midbar, if they had 2 parshas, that was tefillin. They didn't have the 4 parshas. That wasn't the ma'akiv on the mitzvah tefillin. And tefillin, in our kiyum and Yuga, the mitzvah, of course, includes all the 4 parshas, but it is possible to have that mitzvah before. So that's the tushtel that Rabbis Parkov and Snyder want to make here, that if this is the Torah that they have, this is what they read. Rabbi say, as I said earlier, new, but I mean new good. Yes, Ramichel.
How did they mention?
You got to open your picture. Yeah.
How did they mention the midbar? You're supposed to say al uretz ve'al bezuvid.
That's not kasha. That's not kasha.
Benching
that's not a kasha, because you know that you can bench today and say Baruch Hachman Liyav Marid the High Pita. But that's not a kasha, because the whole Yisrael of Mazayin was Haidah to Akash Baruch Hu, and that Haidah could even be Mekuyim today after the tikkun of the exact lashon. And we know that Brichas of Mazayin by definition was the Ovid and Shlomo was to all the way till Haruge Beitar was all constructed in a rolling basis. But a Torah is a different question. There's a different question. So, okay. So the Olam wants to postulate that Krias HaTorah is whatever Torah there was. As I say, I'm more than happy to accept this teretz, assuming that no one can slug it up, and it's consistent with what we're saying. Okay. You hear, Michael? You understand your kasha versus is not a kasha.
I did this halal by Krias Samsuf.
So the answer is that Nevi'im, it's a good, okay. So Nevi'im should be named Tiknu, that is a concept of Hallel, and Hallel is Haida'ah, and we don't know if they weren't even Mekayim Hallel with us Yashir. That's already a host of the raid, the brisker raid, if I remember correctly, in various brisker Svarim, the Chilukim between Shira and Hallel and Chulu. But you're right. The halachic chefts of Hallel could not have been there until David Melech put those Tehillim together. Even afterwards, it was Chazal who chose these prakim of Tehillim. So the answer to all these questions, and the same holds true. The same holds true with other concepts. I looked at. See, that's the problem. I looked at Rabbi Levitz's chat and I forgot what they're going to say now. The same holds true of other issues, but let's take Kallah as an example. Tefillah, the conceptual basis was there. Mikad Mastana, the Avis David, the exact form. So, Chazal, Nevi'im, this is how the chain work. Nevi'im, Chazal, all the way down to the Gainim and Rishonim, took the concept of Tefillah, and it evolved over the centuries. The Yisod was more or less the same. Everybody in this call knows that you can be Iker Hadin Krishma is a different question. You want to ask about Krishma, how they learn Krishma till they got the last part of Krishma. That's Kasha. The Rishonim only asked film. Why did they ask about Krishma? The Krishma is in parts of Hachana. So what happened? What did they do all throughout the Midbar? They didn't say Ashma Yisrael Hashem L'kein Hashem Echad. They already had a Messiah from Yaakov Avinu. Anu Kallah Shvatim V'amru Ma Yisrael Hashem L'kein Hashem Echad. And Yaakov Avinu was Chayzer Baruch Shem Klei Melchus Eilam Bad. So they had this concept already earlier. Then the Nevi'im, this is very important because all the way till the time of the Anshei Knesset, they were Nevi'im. The Nevi'im, which is direct to from the Kodesh Baruch and Chazal and Ruach HaKodesh, decided to articulate all these concepts which we already had. That is not necessarily a teretz for Torah. Not necessarily a teretz for Torah. Benching and Hal is not a perfect template for this. Now you'll say why? Maybe the whole halacha of a Sefer Torah Shechasar only came up later. No, possible. Haraya. It's a machlokes Rishonim whether the Sefer Torah Shechasar is kosher or not. So it's certainly possible it came up later. Okay, Rabbi Sai, we have a very chashuv item here today. So I want to thank Rabbi Parkov and certainly encourage everybody. It's only through people such as Michael and Rabbi Parkov that keep us all thinking. So please send us your aris, dings with me. When I say something that you don't like, not only is it okay to point it out, I very much request it because my attitude toward these things, Rabbi says, is that we're all in this learning together. Okay, so let's go further here. I delusionally thought that in 2 shiur I might be able to go through all the bar mekaymis on the side of the takana of Krias HaTorah, but that of course is wrong. So we're going to continue on this issue here today. Just let me see. There was a question on the chat which I tried. How do we know the Galchim was Misak and Laney? So that's I don't know if you were here last night. That's the whole discussion. We don't know. According to the Rambam and Yerushalmi, it was obviously sometime in those 40 years. And the problem is what? Now, it's very possible, according to the Gemara, if the Rambam's Havana of Nevi'im Shebeneim is Moshe Rabbeinu, it's very possible that Moshe Rabbeinu did it very quickly because of the Nilu. As soon as he saw that 3 days without Torah leaves Klal Yisrael vulnerable to all sorts of terrible things, Hayesh Hashem b'Kirbein Amayim v'Yavei Amalek, so maybe he did it right away. We don't know. According to the Marmakaimis here in the Rishonim, it was it could have been before Mount Torah, because the rest of the Torah from Mishpatim on was a different halachic construct. So the answer to your question is we don't know, and I think I welcome any more research in the subject, because I'm a little jammed up, trying to learn with you these 2 shiurim a day. So anybody who wants to look into this weiter and provide more mekaymis, please do. Okay, Rabbi said yesterday, last evening, and again, I know there are people who can only come on during the day. There are people who can only come on the night. So I'm trying to integrate these two the best that I can. Yesterday we went further in the some sefer on the concept of tirgum, and we went further into the Makairis in the Achrayim as to how and what the Hachana of Krias is. One of the questions that came up is, assuming that it was a Hachana by Rabbeinu, what kind of status does it have? This is Negei L'Maisa. If it's Deraisa, then all of a sudden it becomes much more chamor. If it's the Rabbanan, then it has the perhaps some of the halachic clues associated with Rabbanan, and one of these issues being what the Pri Megadim raises, that maybe it's divrei Kabbalah, and if it's divrei Kabbalah, we go l'chumra. Krias Megillah is divrei Kabbalah, who was invested with nevuah, which raises the question: how much nevuah is inherent in Moshe Rabbeinu? Now, it seems a lot. Inherent in the kind of Krias Torah, it seems a lot, because the Gemara said Nevi'im should be Nehem. But as you saw in the Rishonim seem, in the Kesef Mishnah and others, they seem to be a little questioning about the Nevuah part, because Beis Dinoi seems to have been a takana similar to the other takanas of Ezra. They're going to tell me that the takana that there should not be mara, the behemoth daka in fields required, it was invested with nevuah. We don't know. Now, obviously, this was the takana of Ezra many, many, many years later. So, how much of nevuah is invested in this, and how much of an halacha construct is part of this open question? Okay. What I would like to do today is follow up here a little bit more on the joint questions: A, what the Mekayr is, and B, Im Kvar, is it Dairaisa or Drabanan? So after this Yeshus Yaakov that we saw here, if you'll scroll ahead, whoever is in charge today, who is doing this sharing today, Rabbi Mordechai?
Yes, right now I'm on.
You are not? Okay. For those of you who are not regulars, that's the voice of my Yedid Nefesh and partner of Mordechai Shapiro, without whom none of this endeavor would be able to go weiter. Scroll down, please. Okay, so the Aruch Shulchan says on this question. So one of the questions we brought yesterday was, one of the riots we brought yesterday, the Achrayim bring, and we saw it in 2 places, is the question of Nashim and Ketanim. Because whether or not Krias Torah is inherent in Nashim and Ketanim has obvious implications. Could they be mitzi people? And if you can include an Isha, startlingly enough, Lulei the Takana of Lava Erech Ara to mixed genders, an Isha is, according to the Mechaber, Elul Min Shiva. The Magen Avraham, as we heard last night, for those of you not here, I guess I should say a little slower, the Magen Avraham in Kuf Lamed Hey says something startling, and he says that an Isha, Chaber says, an Isha Elul Min Shiva. Says the Magen Avraham, why? Because Nisha is mechuyev in the shmiya of Krias Torah. What does that mean? What does that mean? That would have implications as to whether, and we'll have to talk about the history when we get to, if we do, hopefully we do, to the history of the Olim, of who's being mitzi what. And if so, how can a Isha be mitzi? What we're interested in right now in this introductory share is, if the Isha is not mechuyev in Talmud Torah, how can she be mitzi anybody if that's the kiyum that a person has in Krias HaTorah. So that's question number one, using Nashim Ketanim as a template. It turns out whether or not the Chiyuv is Deraisa Rabbanan is discussed at some length in Yarchei. Let's start here with the Aruch Shulchan. Aruch Shulchan brings us Masechtas Seifrim that brings the Makar for this Magen Avram. And it's a Chiddush, which most people are not aware of. Nashim Chayaves Shmaya Krias Sefer Ka'anashim. And then the Magen Avram, the Masechtas Seifrim goes on to add something which we now understand a little bit better, having learned this some Sefer inside. What does this mean? And what happened to this minute? The Magen Avram tells you that in Poland, forgot which where the Magen Avram lived. It wasn't Krakow. That's where the Taz lived. But wherever in the heart of the Torah Yishuv in Poland, all the ladies walked out of Krias HaTorah. The Sefer says is a chiyuv of tirgum la'am. Okay, la'am obviously includes the amei ha'aretz, the males, but also a nashim tinaikais. Tinaikais need to hear both the Krias HaTorah and the Navi. Says the Aruch Shulchan, nearly lavchiu gama kamar. I can't accept this as Masechtas Sefer on its face. So I'm going to say it's a dumya de tinaikais. No one is going to go out and say that a little girl is mechuyev in Talmud Torah. A little boy is not mechuyev either. A little boy has a chiyuv chinuch, which is debatable on who chiyuv chinuch is ramiyah. But a little girl. That's why you should have some tourists in Talmud Torah. But I showed you last night in the Mechaber that Isha's this kasha, this problem is already addressed by Rabbi Seinu in the Rishayim, in Taisus and Rosh Hashanah. Says the Aruch Shulchan, this is the template for this is mitzvah sage as man grama. They make a brachas on mitzvah say as man grama, yes. It's Krias HaTorah is man grama. Talmud Torah is man grama. That's the Torah. No, the Gemara says that the Talmud Torah is not because it's man grama. The Gemara says before that Talmud Torah is because of the Vanecha V'Lev Masecha, a pasuk. But Krias HaTorah is man grama. Krias HaTorah can only be done Me'ikar Adin. Don't ask me about Hachana Rabbi Sichos Torah now. Me'ikar Adin has to be done during the day. And Krias HaTorah has to be done with all the halacha constructs which would make nashim pater l'chayra. So that's teres number one. Just like nashim and mavarchais mitzvah sheis man grama, good. So it's a mitzvah sheis man grama. They can make a bracha on this. What does that mean? What does that mean? That means l'chayra that the etzem bracha on Talmud Torah you made with the Berachas HaTorah that you make in the morning. Berachas HaTorah and the Torah are not necessarily, says the Aruch Shulchan, brachais of Talmud Torah. They're brachais of X. What remains to be seen, but it's not brachais on the limud of the Torah.
Maybe he's saying something else. That back then, just the first and the last person made brachas. So if Isha went up in the middle, she wouldn't be saying a bracha. There'd be no Kol Isha problem.
So, a little rachaik to say that's the problem here.
What do you mean Kol Isha? She's lining.
Okay, so now you're all inserting yourself into a future shiur. I don't know when, this week, next week, or the week after, on the structure and the historical development of how it worked from what Krias was referring to as the Shitas of the Rishayim, the Rush, and others of brachas, the same Mikra Adin, based on the Gemara, that the kind of the first Kaira made the bracha, and the last Kaira made the bracha, and everybody didn't, which raises all sorts of halachic questions. But I don't think that this is what he's saying here. He's saying a different word. He's saying one or two words. Bisman HaMishnah Shalei Kol Ha'olam Hayu Mevarchim. Hold on 1 second. Let me get this phone out. So, what's the second teretz here? The second teretz is also very interesting. He says, let's not be medamet to mitzvahs hakel, which Sugis and Chagiga will learn recently. Why? He makes a chiluk. What's the kasha hakel? Everybody's mechuyev in hakel. No, the mitzvah chedes al shom shem elm elm they're kushin. It was muser. It wasn't Talmud Torah. Same as the Magen of Ram. There was nothing walked out. So where does this come from? Okay, so you'll say that there's a Masechta Seifrim, but we take Masechta Seifrim very seriously unless there's a reason not to. It is Chazal. Okay, let's see. Rabbi Shapiro has a question. Rabbi Shapiro has a question. He addresses it with great seriousness. So let me finish this few lines here of the Hachana and come back to your Ha'ara. Yeah, whatever that means, I don't know. Maybe they're not in the that you can't hear from Nez's Nashim, or they have children. The Sechel there, Chamuser, National time with Nam, with Nat Tenekalash, Leaders, Shemasa, the Bark Mashakata, Rabbi Sai. This is an example of the Navartikarov's Tkifastika Chiddush. He takes this Masechel Sefer and he machs it away. And his proof is Pokazi Mayama Devar. Okay, I make this with no further editorial comment because obviously he's saying it's a milsim t'miyah. Okay, what's this? Krias that he's not a true that a woman can be counted. Excellent question. As we'll see later, the Mishnah Megillah says that the list of things that require a minyan, among them kedusha, is Krias Torah. How could you have an isha counted for 10? Now you're telling me that nashim can create a Ada. You say to the Gemara is Ada. So first of all, we know we don't count women for a minyan only because lavarech ara. So we don't count women for a minyan. Director Marcha would the same apply to Krias Torah. First of all, it's not such a raya. Maybe the 10 men lulay them. Second of all, as you know, there's a discussion on Ada, which is for the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem itself, which is the aside of this Nigdashti B'Tzeich B'nei Yisrael is learned from the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. From there, we apply it to those things which are nihugim of Kedusha Hashem. Kedusha is a Kiddush Hashem. I know it sounds startling, but we all mumble it every day, twice a day. When we say Kedusha, you're making a Kiddush Hashem. Because you're the Malachim of Kaddish Hashem Shemaim every day. That's what it's called. It's not saying, we don't call it Halucha. We don't call it Shira. We call it Kedusha. Because it's invested with a high level of Kedusha. So Anashim counted, if you want to create a Kiddush Hashem, it has to be front of Masar Yisrael. You want to create Rachman Islam, prevent a Chil Hashem, Asar Yisrael is the number there. Without going to all the details, this is Shayla Nachrain. Chenechel Mistapit Kol Beis Yisrael Mitzvah Chiddush Hashem, said the Rambam in the beginning of Perek Hail Chesed, and therefore the Achrain want to know if Kol means Nashim, and they say possibly it does. Okay. Why was all the Shachta Ada? That's a Kashan Nershaim. Yes, Mechel?
Back to the previous case, if you have a Shaila about Nushim, do you have a Shaila about Ktanim?
No, so Shlomo himself says at Zichanisht. He says that. Okay, so therefore, I'm not ding to this because I don't have a better pshat than Magen Avraham, A and B. Who am I to ding to? My job is just to give you this marmukam, just to make you think. So think about this. Let's think about how we need to pshat this Magen Avraham. Okay, that's correct. That is correct. When we get to Chavis Sibur Yachid, Rav Marcha believe that the nachs of a Mishnah Zu as to whether or not Krias Torah is a Davashim Kedusha and is Mechayev or not. The Meiri says something interesting. The Meiri always says interesting things on his level of being a Rishon. And the Meiri says that Ezra was Matan Krias Torah B'zman Mincha B'Shabbos, as the Gemara said. Why? Because of Yeshivas Kranais. And the Miri says, so what was Ezra's intent? On page Chaf, what was Ezra's intent? Ezra's intent was, Limud Torah. He wanted at the bottom of the page, he wanted to keep people off the Kranais, but more than that, he wanted them to learn Torah. So Shiurim that the Rabbanim say on Shabbos afternoon are a derivative of this Takanas Ezra. And the Kriya on Mincha Yeshua is not meant in Tashlumim of Beis Vehei, because for all the reasons that I mentioned yesterday, before, it is Midin Krias HaTorah. Okay, so here, this question of what is the Machayim of Krias HaTorah? Is it Limud HaTorah, or is it just a din of Kriya or Shmiya, as the Rambam seems to indicate? Let's move ahead. So, I mentioned a few moments ago that this is the Machlekes and Rishonim as to what the halacha on a Sefer Torah shechasser. So, look at Kuf Mem Gimel. The Ramah brings the Ramah and Ches brings let's see where the Makar is from. Where's the Baragoyla here? It's not cut off. It's in the Ramah. Okay, try to find it in a moment. Brings this shita that one is allowed to be mevarech, and the main promoter of the shita is the Rambam. The Rambam, as you can see in the Tziyun al-Ramah, Tzuvas Rambam the Paradar. Rambam says, as mentioned, Rambam is Mukar and Yerushalmi, that you're allowed to lay b'shas and chnak from a sefer tzula, and you're allowed to make a bracha. Laning, no downside. What's the chiddush? You're just laning. Are you the Yarchei or not Yarchei? But a bracha, it's already a shalom bracha batala, and the answer is yes. However, says the Rav, yesh machpir. If one of the chumashim of the Sefer Torah has is shalom b'lei tais, yesh lahakol. Likewise, by the chumash apish yesh tais b'acher. As I mentioned yesterday, I think the limud this year we're going to do is our Chaim based, which is Krias HaTorah. It overlaps, less Breyer, understandably enough, with Hilchai Sefer Torah. Hilchai Sefer Torah is complicated subject on its own, Ra'ui for a Yarchei Kallah on its own. So I'm not going to go deeply into this, but for our purposes, it's important to know that the Shittas of the Rambam, as brought in this Ramah, that B'shas Chak, one could learn from a Sefer Torah apostle, because obviously, first of all, it goes to the discussion we were having earlier, highlighted by Rav Parkov, about what it constitutes a Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah apostle is kosher, so why should a Sefer Torah kosher, half of it, be kosher? Yesh l'chalik, but that goes to that discussion. The Magen Ram and the Machzor Shekel discuss this issue. The Magen Ram brings a psak of the Maram Lublin, who was his predecessor as the Gadol Adoyer and psak. A couple days earlier, Pasa Gram Lublin. Nim nimtze tois b'sefer Torah v'ein shom acheres, yashlim zayin krum b'sefer Torah v'lo yosef aleihem. Only zayin krum. So, no isofis. What about mincha? The mincha lo yitziu sefer Torah kim dein krim m'chayves hayom kol dein chayves hayom kol kach. Dein elam shem yeshvei kronis. As I state in Maram Lublin. Okay, so far nothing that would get anybody to shoot off their chair. Then the Magen Ram adds, "Venerally, the afilu bakam shi chayva. Ein leitzil lechatchilam kein chumash echad shalik meish kas Ramakan." The Magen Ram is not shalem with this psak, not happy with this psak And he says, the Evan, I'm going to go with the Ramah, but only with the Ramah's qualification. There have to be at least one chumash, the one you're leaning from, clear, has to be shalem. And therefore, if there's a Tois in another place in the Sefer Torah, it's not ma'akev. This is not Dibra Kasav B'Haiva. Rabbi Kallah says we can discuss to Usim in Sifrei Torah, because that's one of the more Dibra Kasav B'Haiva issues that we're going to face. And the reason why I say because generally mistakes are found when and where. When and where, by side. This is not a trick question. When and where do we find mistakes in Sifrei Torah? Well, we later, right? Today, the computer is based, but as far as I know, even the most dedicated guy does not go and check the entire Sefer Torah every Shabbos before. Why not Taka? Check the Erev before. Why don't we check the Sefer Torah? What's the answer?
Chesed kashrus.
As a Chesed kashrus. Why doesn't an Erev have a Chesed kashrus? Okay, because we see that there are mitzias that the weather and other things can take down a chazaka on an Erev. By the way, our place will give you a chesed kashrus and an too, and a question of a suffix, but that's obviously not today's discussion. So what do we see? We see that since the Yesod of the Takana of Mincha was Yeshvei Kranais Chanayis, who do not go learn on Beis Vehei, so they added an extra kriya on Shabbos L'chara. According to Rashi's Shita, does that mean, is this consistent with the mirror? Rabbi say, I don't want to kvetch in machlekes in here if we don't have to, but this really is an important question. What is the mechayiv? The mechayiv of limud Torah, the mechayiv of Krias Torah. So I'm not going to tell you that this language is so 100% dispositive, but if you look at the Machzeh Shekel, it's a bit clearer. Machzeh Shekel says on the bottom left, Yarchei Karanis, what's the language? Freeze. Underneath Kiveger, I'm sorry. Underneath Kiveger. Right there. Machzeh Shekel. Yarchei Karanis. Vein Shaimer Krias Torah came Shabbos Shachli, and Avu Mosif Krias Shabbos Mincha. Again, language which is not dispositive. I wouldn't make too much of this. I wouldn't say this is 100% dispositive in this shaila of what is chayiv of Krias Torah. The question is still open by side. Okay, now allied to this question, as we mentioned, is the question of whether or not we have here two questions: the Rice of Rabbanon and Chayvas Shmiya and Chayvas Kriya, both which I would like to address today. So, in the Prima Gadim, I brought on page Lamed Beis. Let's scroll ahead here about 10 pages. Prima Gadim says clearly, Prima Gadim is important both for his analysis of the P'tichas Kaileles and Rice of Rabbanon. But on page Lamed Beis, Prima Gadim, this we saw, we'll come back to this. This we saw yesterday. I'm on the next page, Lamed Beis, I believe it is. You can get to Lamed Beis. Prima Gadim here says clearly, Hadam Bab Kama. Sorry to make you scroll here by say, but Rabbi Shapiro is an expert in this. No, it's in the Eshel on left up page Lamed Beis. If this is page Lamed Beis and move it down a little bit, yeah, right there on the side. Freeze, beautiful. Says the Prima Gadim, Hadam Bab Kama, pay Beis, Melch Yamim, Leimayim Kasha, B'chal Yom Karan Krishma, V'hu Torah. How can there be 3 days without Torah Krishma? Who said the link Krishma in the midbar? Good, the Kasha. The Minsk Rebbe, the Hachana L'Racha, has a kuntrus called kuntrus Shema Yaakov. I remember when he was putting out the Sefer, and I was able to help him a bit on some of the technical aspects of putting out the Sefer and editing it and getting it printed. And I remember it was very, this kuntrus is very of him. He actually put his name into it. It was based on this chazal of Yaakov, the Shvatim reading Krishma. The Prima Gadim was nemt on, and the midbar they learned Krishma. Whether they had the whole Krishma or they even said Shema Yisrael Shem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the Gemara Benach says the Farish, so you can be Yaitz the midst of Talmud Torah was Shema Yisrael Shem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So what's this business of going Gimel Yamim B'lai Torah? says we should die. Yes, you have success. Okay, whatever that means, I'm not sure. Yes, somebody was going to say something.
Yeah, I want to tell us from Roy Soloveitchik. He said the problem was Torah b'tzibur, shiurim. There was, saying Krishma is for yourself, but the shiur, the point of the Krias Torah is the shiur. The Rambam emphasizes the word berabim.
So, Kadmai Rabbeinu Prima Gadim. Think. Take a look. Take a look. Take a look. Mishkan Kasha. Tzarech Leimer. The Wavad Zet Tzarech Lasek B'Torah. Lasek B'Torah. Shev Shleiach B'Torah B'Teicha Ksav Dafka. Yuel Kallah Psicha. I learned this Prima Gadim either the way Rav Michal wants to say, quote from Rav Yashaber, that's the din of Talmud Torah the Rabbim. Okay, I'm sure he has many rayas to that. I would say also, along the lines of what we've been saying, there's also a din, the chayra of Talmud Torah b'havana. And that goes to the question of whether you can be a Talmud Torah if you don't understand anything. You have to understand what's going on. So Krias Shema is all very good. Maybe you understand that you be Mekabel Shemayim, but your Havana is limited to Kabbalah Mach Shemayim. Where is it the Talmud Torah Shabbai? Maybe the Talmud Torah you need more. But I'm just telling you what the Prima Gadim says. Prima Gadim says that something was missing here, that you cannot be Mekayim with Krias Shema, and he gives two terutzim, and somehow it has to be Mekayim Haksav Dafka. Why? Why? The Pashut Pshat there, Rabbi say, is because before there was Torah Shabbat Peh, and Torah Shabbat Peh in the form that we understand it didn't exist. When did Torah Shabbat Peh? When was the rudiment antecedents of Torah Shabbat Peh? When was the first Torah Shabbat Peh? Was Moshe Rabbeinu's Mesiras HaTorah to Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and the Zekanim as he heard it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we don't know. It's a Gemara in Eruvin. It's not mashma. The Gemara doesn't say, if I remember correctly, and maybe Reb Parkov will correct me, that Moshe Rabbeinu leaned, that wrote it down and then started leaning. It doesn't sound that this is what he did. It sounded what he did was Rabbi Sai Heintam Malaran, Evid Kanani, and Evid Ivri, and they gave a shir kloli on the Hilchai Evid Ivri, as you heard it from the Rabbi Shalom. Kisik Evid Ivri Sheisham Talit, and he taught it to the Aaron Zakanim. Then they went out and started having a shiur and barabim. But the site of the first limud was B'tay Chaksav. Not clear. It sounded it was B'tay Balpeh, the kiyum of this of the Sefer Torah Shabbai was through Moshe Rabbeinu's writing it down. So this is not clear. Torah Shabbat that requires a vana. Yeah, I agree. What this Prima Gadim means is Sarachiyun, but he tells you that there has to be limited Torah. If you look in the Rambam, in Halacha Aleph, you'll see that we made several diukim in the Rambam. I guess we have to go back to the. And I'm sorry this year, but if you can you do a really fast scroll back to the Rambam, because it's important to show the Olam. Here we go. So the Rambam says, what's the sixth word? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, seventh word in the Rambam? What happens? It all happened to us 2 years ago, not such a long time ago. 2 years ago, many of us, all of us, many of us, most of us were challenged to hear Krias HaTorah, Birabim. What were you supposed to do? So if you remember at the time, the Hayrais we got was, if you can, I remember this psak, gather whoever you have there in your family and read the Parsha out loud, maybe with the Tamei Mikra. Why? Maybe because at least that Chelik Shabbai, we didn't have a Sefer Torah, you had a Chumash, so you had to be Saimach on the ultimate Shastat Chak, and you may not have had a minyan, but maybe a Rabbim doesn't require somehow a kiyum of Barabim, you would be Yaitza. What would you be Yaitza? So at the time I was thinking, maybe we Yaitza one of the two dinim of Krias HaTorah, which is Talmud Torah Barabim somehow. But Al Kapar the Rambam still says Barabim. And this goes to the Prima Gadim's Vart. You can't be Mekayim, Mitzvah, Talmud Torah, Krias HaTorah Barabim with Krias Shema which is generally said b'yachad. Now you say Krias Shema b'Rabbim because you say it in shul. It's not a din of Rabbim. You're saying it as part of a minyan that is doing Birchas Krias Shema with a tzibur. But the Krias Shema Shabbai, the Kabbalah Sal Malchus Shemayim, is a yachadik halacha. What's the raya to that, Rabbi said? Maris, what's the raya to that? That's a yachadik halacha. Because you can't be yaitza l'chayra, you can't be yaitza Krias Shema. It's a diyun in the paiskim, but l'chayra, the pshuta, you can't be yaitza Krias Shema k'shmei kaina. You have to say it. You have to say it. What does that prove? That proves that Kabbalah Sal Malchus Shemayim cannot be outsourced. Maybe limited HaTorah can be outsourced. All you got to do is listen. Or at least the Krias Shabbai, but not the limited HaTorah. Akapanim, whether or not the Pri Megadim and the Boston Rav are saying the same thing remains to be seen. But this is what the Pri Megadim does say. Okay, let's go back to page, I forgot where it was. Let's learn together a fascinating shtickle Torah from the Kallah Rav. So first of all, a background here and who the Kallah Rav for. Timing check. First of all, let me make a couple of announcements here. First of all, about the upcoming Yarchei Kallah, I will say that we got confirmation in the last couple of days. This is a schus gadol ba'oid that schedule is still in the process of being finalized. We're late for obvious reasons, but we were able to get a confirmation that we will have the schus of having the Zakan Gadol Adar Gersh Nedelstein will come to us. We'll be in Bnei Brak on the first evening. And he will come to give some divrei chizuk, and even rarer, and even a bigger kind of gruchni, Rav Dov Landau will come. Dov Landau was no nonsense. He was here in America a few months ago. Thousands of people came to hear him, even though he speaks on a high level and is, not necessarily the brilliant oratorical skills that people need in Mavritzei Torah today. But he's widely acknowledged as the Mar the Kallah Talmuda, I guess along with Rabbeinu Reb Chaim. And he says, you don't need my chizuk. You're almost chizuk v'aymed. You want to hear a vart in Krias HaTorah, the Sugi Krias HaTorah, I'll tell you a vart in the Sugi Krias HaTorah. So that's a special chus that we're going to have. I'm also asked to remind, we're getting there slowly, to ask the Lame Day, when there a Zoom call, we'd like to make a siyum. We picked him by the cotton for shtickle obvious reasons. I think for Pesach, I'm not sure exactly how far we are. He will send out another request in the spreadsheet. I think we're missing a few blots. If you can take that on. And also, the tzibur as a whole, the entire Yarchei will also be making a siyum with Eicha Nishmas to B'daili Yisrael, of David Soloveitchik and Yitzchak Shiner. They both, with Davanenu, were nifted the same day. We were originally planning to be there in their yard side. Once we scheduled, we decided to go ahead with it. It will be Divrei Zikaron L'Zichram. And finally, a little bit of an appeal. We'd like to get some Hakaras HaTorah in a tangible way. In addition to the incredible sponsorships that people are doing for Rabbi Weiss and Rabbi Kallah Shiur, we'd like to buy them a small gift. And anybody who would like to be mishtatev from those sites, and we'll let the Rav know who is just a small number. If you can somehow contact Pesach with a minimum pledge of $36, we're far away from our needed goal there. That would be appreciated. Okay, Adkan, I'm a terrible schnorrer, but I do the best that I can. Let's go back to the main event here. So the Kozman Zayin was a Ram in Yeshivas Chachma Leblin. While Ramesh Shapiro was alive, he was appointed by Ramesh Shapiro, who was a Goyin Olam. And again, this is an example, as you'll see in a moment, of a nusach, which now the interwar era, the nusach of the signain of the lumdis, the language is different, but the lumdis, which was prevailing already in the yeshivas after Reb Chaim was nifter right at the end of the First World War, of dissecting Inyanim al-Pi, the dinim, also took hold in Poland after Ramesh Shapiro's untimely death in 1933, I think it was. which is one of the great blows to the history of Klal Yisrael. The Kazakova took over as the Shiur of Yachal. So in his Tshuva Sefer, I think it's brought here on page Chav Dalet, if I remember correctly, Chav Gimel, he discusses this issue in a lumdishal way. Let me tell you what he says outside, and then we'll see a little bit inside. He says a big Kiddush. He says, before you hear Krias HaTorah, a person should be Yaitse, should be Mechaven to be Yaitse. It's on page Chav Gimel, Rav Mordechai. Should be Mechaven to be Yaitse, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Now you're on the wrong page. Chav Gimel. It should be beautiful. I think the page before. No, this page. Should be Mechaven to be Yaitse, the mitzvah of Krias. You can freeze it right here. No, you went too far. Beautiful. It should be Mechaven to be Yaitse, the mitzvah of Krias HaTorah. Limud HaTorah. A. And he should be mechaven along the lines of the Pri Megadim to be yaitze the mitzvah of Krias HaTorah shebeksav. All of a sudden, we have a chiddush here, Rabbi Sai. There's a chiyuv of limud HaTorah specifically on Torah shebeksav. Maybe. There's a chiyuv of limud HaTorah. Does that mean every day there's a chiyuv of limud Torah? All day, every day. Right now, you guys are all doing Mekayim millions of mitzvahs because every single word that you say of Torah, you're Mekayim mitzvah Talmud Torah. So, does that mean that the limud Torah we're doing now is not a kiyum of limud Torah? It's because it's not mitayich haksav. What's the answer to that? Anybody want to postulate an answer to that? Anybody want to suggest an answer to that? Mechel, what's the answer?
Why is it not miksav?
You're looking at a page from the Silas of Tshuvas Eretz Tzvi. Is that Matech Ksav? You want to get up on Shabbos and say, Rabbi Sai, it's too hard to do Parsha Ksisa, very, very long. The Sheni, the Til Sheni is the longest Aliyah in the whole Torah. We're going to learn today. I'm going to read to you today a Tshuva in the Eretz Tzvi. You have to create a Torah as a Chanesht. So that has to be Matech Ksav. Ksav means from the Sefer Torah Shalem. I'm asking you a question.
No. It says that now in Yarchei it says now that we don't use Sefer Torah every day, we can read from the Ksav, from the print.
Good. Okay, so that's where we're going. So I'm telling you, taking that one step further, that Chazal tell us that why is it called Talmud Bavli? Because it's Balu Me'akoil. Balu Me'akoil. The Maral says, in the Moral's yeshiva in Prague, his cheder in Prague, he was Takim and Takain, and all the way through, there was no such a thing as not only learning Gemara, Talmud Bavli. You had to learn Mikra, Chud, Tanakh, Mishnah, and Gemara. Meshach Hadaris, it didn't work out that way, and we teach our children Gemara. Why? So Chazal tell us why. Because Gemara is Talmud Bavli is Bol Makol, and you have Mikra in Talmud Bavli. You have Psukim in Talmud Bavli. That's what the Torah Shalom is so helpful about. So that's one way of doing it. But maybe Mikra Din, you have to have a limud mitayich haksav. Says the Kazal cover, the Iker mitzvah is mitayich haksav, and he brings the levush to prove this. And the levush says, "Bismanenu yemakayin the mitzvahs limited Torah al yedei a sefer Torah." When? Obviously, when you're karim by b'tzibur, and therefore it raises the problem: what's the mitzvah? It's the mitzvah of the Kriya or the mitzvah of the Shmiya, and does that include the Shaila, the requirement of Havana? And this he brings the Shulchan Aruch Harav, which we will see inside in a moment. So let's learn together. It's worth it. Time check, Rabbi Sai. For those of you who are not regulars, generally on Monday I go a little bit over. So I'm asking the shus for the ilm I'm giving you. I know this is a bigger ilm than usual, and some of you. All of you have things to do. So it's now 11:58. We are going to learn this Eretz Tzvi together. It'll take us about 10, 15 minutes. So we're probably going to go till somewhere around 12:15. Anybody who has to go, obviously, feel free to go. And then you can take a look there at Tzvi yourself. I'll try to learn to go that one because it raises very, very interesting questions here. So he starts off by telling you, wow. Okay. The B'Torah Shmei Koine. How do you even a Talmud Torah al Dei Shmiya? Who says? Taisa says. Taisa is in Brachas Daf Chafam Beis. Different Masl K'da Ashkechan, which we neglected the copy here, says clearly that you are Mekayim, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah with Shmei Koine. Says the, I have to cut out, everything should be available. Lufianis daiti ikr mitzvahs Talmud Torah shabiksav kameshakasa Rashi the ikr mitzvah shinan Talmud Torah shabiksav. Okay, he's bringing you a Rashi. I don't think that necessarily needs a riot to that. Okay, in the footnotes, he sends you to another shtickle Torah from there. It's fee. The kain chashav al peh. The halach is darv shabiksav iyat or shayla al peh. And the Torah is Darvish Shemksav. So you have to lean it, you say Chesed Torah. How do we know that? Because there's a Taisus in Shabbos who says that Mikra did, Yater Shalom Ralpeh. Why are we allowed to learn what we're learning now, Torah Shabbat Peh? That's the heter of Torah Shabbat Peh. We needed a heter for that. Rabbeinu Kodesh needed a heter for that. The Seif Edom Eskayam is Kitikuda, but Me'eker Hadin, we really should be learning Mitay Chaksav. Kishmek so want it every day. Want it every day. Good kasha, want it every day. We'll only be Mekayim Talmud Torah grade B as we're learning now. Are you telling me that all the tirch that you people put into come on in the middle of the day to listen to a shiur is not being credited to you in Shemayim as grade A Torah because we don't have Krias at Torah? Don't want to go into whether you can do Krias Torah on Zoom or not. Interesting question. Even if you can't do Krias Torah on Zoom, because so far we're not postulating that Zoom creates a minyan or a davar for a davar of kedusha, but maybe that Talmud Torah Shabbai aspect, maybe I should ask one of our Chashavai Kriya. I'm sure there's a bunch of them to take a Sefer Torah out and start reading something in Mishpatim so we can mekayim Krias Torah Chaksav. Why do we make a bracha on Krias Torah? We already made a bracha in the morning. As I zakter. So now you telling me, Rabbi, so we should all close this thing down right now, go to our local shul, where everybody has to have a Sefer Torah in his house and learn from Sefer Torah. They're Mekayim, grade A, mitzvahs of Talmud Torah. Chiddush Atzum. And then he says, with this, I'm going to answer a kasha of the Rashba. Rashba says, why don't we make a bracha on Torah, lifoneh v'lachreya? Make a bracha in the morning. Okay. Why don't we make a Torah right before learning or right after learning? So you don't make a bracha after learning. Okay. So by the time says, what bracha after learning was only after learning. Learning is 24/7. You have a heter, whatever. Because you have to, but Mikra didn't. No such thing as stopping. You all know this, right? Says the Kazakov, according to me, it's a right to what I'm saying. The drash like correct limud ater shemiksav. That ikar mitzvahs Talmud Torah v'shinantam a big chiddush atzum. He's saying that Pshat is not in the Rambam, it's not in the Rishonim that I can find, but he's saying that the side of limud Torah, which is nilmad v'shinantam, is Iker Takana, grade A, platinum, limud Torah is Matei Sefer Torah. So at the Kazakov, you're going to ask me if Shinantam is a different drasha than the Gemara and Kedushin Shimchadot Mepicha off the Gam game. Exactly, Al-Cholkei Torah is that Gankain Rash to Torah Shabbat, Gankain Chi of Gomer V'il Il Dover Lakem Chaim. First, Matar Lamitzina Rak Torah Shabbat. Okay, you can't slug them up. He says all these drashos are all what's the right word? All angled to Torah Shabbat. And that's a brachas like Kallah Zeh. Then he goes weiter and he mentions the raya that I said yesterday that even Shemois, Shnei Mikra V'Chatargum, Mikra Din should be from Sefer Torah Kosher. Mitzvah Kreis Shnei Mikra V'Chatargum, take Sefer Torah Kosher. Mikra Din, you look at that simon. The preferred way of being kaim to the Torah, the element is not makbid on this, as far as I know. Some people I've seen doing it, but take Sefer Kosher. Ein Baruch V'Ner Chaya. Okay, so now he comes to his Chiddush La'alacha, which is known as the Chiddush of the Kazakov and Inyanei of Krias Torah. And if not, you are not Yaitza. Big Chiddush. Big Chiddush. Rabbi Sternbach, in Ismanim Ismanim, and I mentioned this. I didn't get too far with it because it wasn't time, but I mentioned this when we learned in Inyanei Chanukah, the Ilchas Krias and HaTorah of Chanukah. Moshe Sternberg says a big chiddush, and he says that there's two types of Krias and HaTorah. There's the Krias and HaTorah of Shabbos and Yantiv, which is Ikara Midin Talmud Torah, and then there's Krias and HaTorah of other Chayivim, which Ikara is the other dinim, and examples of that are Dal Parshia, Yisroch Chaydesh, Chanukah, and Purim. And he says, if in fact you're going to postulate that the other Parsha Shabbos is Din Talmud Torah, so the mitzvah that you're doing is etzem to be Shemei Torah, and if you lane along with the Shleach Tzibur, it's fine, because the Ikar Din is mitzvah limud Torah. The other Chayivim have different. The other categories, as I said, are the 11 categories. Some of them may have different Mechayvim. It comes up with a big Kiddush which says, Chanukah, Purim, Chaydesh, Al Parshiyais do not lane along with the Bal Kriya, because there the mitzvah is not Talmud Torah, that you can be Yotze by saying it. The mitzvah is Shmiya of the Kriya. Parsha Zachar, you don't have to know the Shtikl Torah of Rab Chaim, why Shmuel's Meshasev Shol, when you hear Zachar Shas L'Chamalek. All you have to hear is Zachar Shas L'Chamalek. Not a day of Talmud Torah. You don't have to know the Mechas Chinuch. Kash on Nashma Pater. All you have to know is that Amalek did a bad thing, and let's remember it. It's all you have to know. How do you mekayim that? Yachal B'Leiv Talmud Leimar. You have to say it Peh, and Chazal attached it to a Krias and Torah. So it's a din of Kriya. He says, one should not read along with the Bal Kriya and those, if you get the aliyah for those parshiyos, because there's no din of Shemei Ka'ineh. There's no din of, there's no din of Talmud Torah, the din of Shmiya. And if you lane, everybody knows, Kallah. Big Chiddush, big Shikol Torah in the Rabbi Zmanim. I will get the chance to look at it, maybe or maybe not. But this is Einlich to what is being said here. And therefore he says, Kol Echad might see Kol HaTzibur B'Kriya B'Bracha. So everybody has to be mechaven of Krias and Torah. And the bracha, what are you being mechaven? Be mechaven to be Yotze, the Talmud Torah Shabbai of Krias and Torah. By say your whole Shabbos could be different this Shabbos. Because you're going to say, Ich nehm sich unter this chumrah of the Eretz Tzvi, and Memela, when you hear Parshas Kisisa, and you hear the Kriya, you'll hear about the Shkolim first, and all numerous mitzvahs of Parshas Kisisa, and you say, already need Mechayiv, Mechaven, Mechayiv mitzvah Talmud Torah, and you're going to be very careful not to talk Ben Gaver LaGaver, because you may miss the bracha, as I zuck there. So why over in every aliyah? So the mitzvah shiyub shiva kruyim, the daimel still dalet kaisais. The mitzvah ne'atzma. So every aliyah is a mitzvah. Tav brach ne'atzma. And then he brings a morale in dalet kaisais, which is not our sugi now. Achinam mitzvah shiyub shiva kruyim kolachet tzarach brach ne'atzma. Okay, and he says, well, maybe that's why do we make a bracha me'safa? No. This is such a big. Sorry, Rachel. Yeah.
I mean, the Gemara gives a reason why.
I know. Big Kiddush. He needs a source for this, so he found a Lavush. In the Torah Belt, everybody knows when you say a Kiddush and you're looking for a source, one of the places you look at Lavush, because Rabbeinu Lavush was known for his incredible Chidushim. So he brings a Lavush, which says, listen to this. The Rush says it's no mitzvah ksiva sefer Torah today because l'matam is b'nechem, and therefore v'hayayim to page chavdal v'hayayim ein leim sefer Torah. Why not taka? Kasim alavush. What do you mean? What do you mean ein leim sefer Torah? Of course you are. Yaim gam came sefer Torah kairba. Beautiful raya. You see that Krias and Torah is a din of Talmud Torah. The zeh pashut. Just to go further, it says a Rav Zal. Who's the Rav Zal? Okay, so when depends who you're talking to. And the Rishonim mentioned the Rav Zal, it's the Rambam. When the Gedali Neisa Kel mentioned the Rav Zal, it's the Mechaber. Here the Rav Zal is the Shulchan Aruch Harav. Shulchan Aruch Harav, has, an extensive kuntras on Talmud Torah, and he says, the B'Torah Sheb'Ksav Yetz Nechav Shem Revinim. This goes to yesterday's question. I'm sorry for that. I don't know how to turn it off. This goes to yesterday's question of whether you need to be maven the kriya. Said the Shulchan Aruch Harav and Bavus to Shikol that you do. You don't. Sorry, you don't have to, because the Yaitza does with the Shmiya of a Haraya. Amartz makes a bracha, has no idea what he's talking about. So you see that the mitzvah of Talmud Krias Torah is mamash. The mitzvah of Talmud Torah is zois v'le'acheres and davam for a Yaitza. And then the question is, why taka Yaitza? Teretz it. Shulchan Aruch telling you a chiddush that somehow Yaitza. But if Talmud Torah, why Yaitza? We just say that you understand. Okay, so this is a little bit lighter ba'arafail. And now he addresses the issue that I mentioned a moment ago. So we know that the Mechaber Pasuk is the Kuf Mem Aleph, that the Oila has to read with the Kar Balachash, and the Makar for this is none other than a Zayar Kaddish. It's brought in the Beis Yosef and Kuf Mem Aleph. So the question is, why is that? Why is that? So he makes two dinim here. Makes two dinim. The in Amiris Atzmai Yaitza Oila B'Kriyasai. This din, that whatever the Oila is being Mekayim, whatever mitzvah the Oila means Mekayim, is Yaitza with his Kriya. However, so what do you need about Kriya for? He's speaking here on the Hanacha that there's a din of Chiyav of Krias. Sorry, it makes two dinim. There's a din on himself and there's a din on the tzibur. The din on himself he yaitz by saying it. The din of the tzibur, for whatever reason, we didn't trust the person, the time of Marake, for whatever reason, it's Mavayashi and Shimisha Nayedeya. As Rishonim say, said Matakin about Kairei to be might see the tzibur dika halacha. There's a yachid dika halacha, which he writes the Krias atzmai, and the tzibur dika halacha comes out if somebody doesn't do the Kriya atzmai, not yaitz that Kriya, and maybe not yaitz Talmud Torah. What are you yaitz? Yaitz the tzibur dika Krias Torah shabai doesn't say exactly to dinim, but this seems where he's going. Okay. Now he says, what do I need a Balkaira for? Why can't the Oila be considered a Balkaira? So he brings a raya from a din Hilchas Gittin, which is a Shtikla Perlish raya, so I'm going to leave it out. And he concludes here with Berchus Barzai. He asks the Kasha, why is everybody benching with the Mavarech? Marvshach. If the Mavarech, and we discussed this when we learned the Chazimun a few years ago, if the Mavarech is the one that is being Moitzi you and Zimun, you have to be quiet. How can you have me talking b'shas you're being Yaitse with the Zimun of the Mavarech? And it's not a Zimun. But the meaning is that people say they mumbled themselves. They try to finish before the end of the bracha, so you can say Amen. But why? Just be quiet and listen. And there are some people who are makbid on this, obviously. But he has to explain them in the Kallah. Pirishu. Do ma'itziam b'mitzvah atzma shkol yishma diber echad shamaytzi l'kulam. Yashad WD's mitzvah. Machas shkol yaitz bay. Aremas melech. Zerem shayitz kol yidei chavasal m'gai prat zeshel der mitzvah. Chamak chajazim will come to prat zeshel mitzvah kol yaitz b'namavarach zebba. It makes a beautiful secretary here, the way I understand. The way I understand it is, he's really saying two brisker dinim here. There's a din of Birchas HaMazayin, and there's a din of the Hidur Mitzvah of Birchas HaZimun, she'echad mevarech l'kula. But there's two separate dinim. The reason why the Minhag Olam is to say, the Paiskim discuss this. They discuss this because maybe you won't hear every word. That's the Pashtum Shah. But he's saying alumnus here. And the reason why every individual says Birchas HaMazayin, because it's the Chiyuv of Birchas HaMazayin, which is Revates on the person. Why are we listening to the Mizamein? And why is he being Mizamein? Because it's a din of Hidur Mitzvah of Echad Mevarech L'Kulam. We're trying to do two things at the same time. Two things at the same time. Kind the mitzvah berachas hamazon. Everybody say berachas himself. Well, at the same time, this Inyan of Hidur mitzvah of Zimun and Echad Mevarach L'Kulam is being accomplished by the Mevarach. That's what he says. What's the obvious nimshal? The obvious nimshal is that the same holds true of Krias Torah. There's a mitzvah that the Yachid has, and that Yachid is looking for what mitzvah it is. So the mitzvah is Limud Torah. And there's a mitzvah that the Rabbim has to be Yaitza, I don't want to call it a Hidur mitzvah, but to be Yaitza Krias Torah of a Rabbim, maybe because the Rambam says that there's a Mechayev of a Rabbim, and maybe because, as from Gottesman seems to indicate, maybe as what Shiur says, Zunder Kiyom of a mitzvah of Talmud Torah the Rabbim. Talmud Torah the Rabbim. Maybe that's what happened in the Gimel Yamim. They were Nilu, and therefore we do both. And that's the package that is handed to us. Oh, we are Mekayim, mitzvah of Krias Torah.
No.
Somebody said no. Okay. Right. Parkov is saying no. I'm telling are you agreeing with my definition of no, which means maybe, but you need a better ride for that? Are you that's your shot? I'm not the Kozhakov's lawyer. He doesn't need me for this. When it comes to the Rishonim, we have to break our head and try to figure out what they're saying. When it comes to Achronim, my job is to see what they say. And we can't think, and you're certainly allowed to think. Okay, Rabbi Sai. So this is a natural place to break. I really, really need to finish the Raisa and Rabbanan, and there is a large amount of Inyanim still left on the Hagdama of the Mechayev of Krias Torah, but Belez Breira, there's Berkiyasa, there's a lot of very important sources we have to see. But Belez Breira, that's going to have to be done tonight at 8:00. And tomorrow, for scheduling purposes, there'll be a new segment. We're going to go into these allied, but tomorrow and then the rest of the week, we're going to have to do very, very Yishmak alumnish stuff, and Kriya and Shmiya, which, as you can see, all this is obviously intertwined. Okay, any questions on the chat?
Tonight, are we on the Monday night link or the regular link?
That's a good question. I don't know. Rabbis Shapiro and or Letterek, can you answer that question?
The ad that went out for the Hachana Shiurim all have this link. So that would include tonight as well.
Okay, so for those, the question came from one of our Monday night regulars. We have might as well make a free advertisement here. Doesn't cost $2 million a minute. For our Monday night the Shiurim, we learn in Yunam and Ilchas Tefillah, and we just recently, obviously, for overlap reasons, are learning Ilchas Krias Torah. So we do that on a separate link line, but it's all consolidated. So everybody on the normal Monday nights come on this special link. Okay. Dr. Letterreich has now send you the address from Rabbi Kallah. Just make it out to him. I mean, if you're talking about already, if you want a tax deduction because you're going over the 250 limit, then we'll figure out a way to get you a tax deduction. But otherwise, just make it out to him. Contact him and see if you can participate in this. It's really a small thing. And everybody should have a little bit of a chelik in it. We went through the numbers yesterday, and we figured out that there were over 100 shiurim by each. And you can do the math yourself. It's a small amount of money. Tisku kol chal mitzvahs, and I will see you at Hashem. Hopefully, whoever can come on tonight at 8 and tomorrow at 11, we'll try to keep you updated on the scheduling issues in the Yarchei Kallah for those who are coming. For those who are not, we have pledged to do our best. We're trying to coordinate as best that we can. The staff is working hard that the shiurim will be live streamed back here, the evening ones. Day shiurim, by definition, it's all have to be recorded, but the evening ones will be live streamed back here. We're going to try to keep the schedule. Can't be perfect, but we'll try to keep the schedule as close to the one that we have. I think we're going to move back everything 1 hour. We're still working out the final details and let you know in the course of the next day or two. But for those who cannot make their Israel, there will be this limud Next week there'll be an Hachana Shiur, and then you'll hear a Shiurim by Gedolei HaTalmid Chachamim, Rabbi Kaplan, Rabbi Weiss, Rabbi Kallah, and Rabbi Osban, all English speakers. We'll be giving Shiur in real live time, and we hope very much that we can get it live streamed here. Okay, Rabbi Say, I will see you all tonight and then tomorrow. Yarchei.
Thank you.
Have a good day.